The following episode may contain explicit language and spoilers. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to What's Your Fandom, the podcast where myself and my good friend Stuart journey through the fandoms of film, TV, games, books and comics, flying our geek flags and talking our way through the multiverses. All of them. My name is Mike, and in this episode we are here to discuss the rise and the fall of the MCU. Say hello, Stu.
Hello, Stu.
How are you doing?
I'm very good. A little bit warm, but I'm good. You?
It's very, very warm, isn't it, in South Wales?
Yes.
For the listeners to understand. Actually, disclaimer, I have my window open behind me and I have a fan angled at my face. So if you can hear any weird microphone distortion or seagulls or sirens, it's just Llanelli. I wouldn't worry about it. We'll just call it atmosphere. You're getting extra ambiance for your money that you're not paying, because we do this for free. But yes, do other than hot, I'm fine, thank you. How's your week been? All right?
Yes, not too bad.
Yeah.
Not bad at all. You know, you just got me. You said seagulls and sirens.
Yes.
I'm thinking, not dissently or anything, but what the hell are the seagulls doing that law enforcement has to get involved with?
What aren't they doing, Stuart?
Well,
honestly, I feel like they've got a degree in criminology around here. They are a menace to society,
yes.
But to be fair, I live by the coast. I shouldn't complain. It's lovely. It's so nice. Okay, the seagulls were worse when I lived in Swansea, because I think they must have nested on the building or flat that we lived in, and it was just deafening. Like when the sun would rise at 4 o'clock in the morning in the summer, and it was just like Seagull City. It was insane. Oh, it was insane. Those days I do not miss. So I shouldn't really complain about them here. These are a bit more of a rural seagull than a city gal, you know? Um, yeah, they're just annoying and loud. Hopefully they'll go to sleep soon, and then you won't hear them at all on the podcast.
Well, strangely, I have to bring up seagulls for this part. This is actually a story that I heard in work today from one of our colleagues. She told me
Right.
this first thing this morning, and she was asking me she was like, "Do you think I was more likely to win the lottery or for this to happen to me?" So I was like, "What was it?" And basically, obviously, it's like high temperatures now, so she's driving in the car, window down, and somehow a seagull was flying and managed to shit like in her car as she was driving at 30 miles an hour, and it went on
Ugh.
the side of her hair, it was on the car seat, it was on the back of her,
Oh, what are the chances?
and I think now they're doing fucking drive-bys.
They literally are. I'm telling you, they have taken courses. There's going to be a seagull rebellion one day, and it's going to emanate from here.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't experienced that whole thing that you see on TikTok where you're walking along with the chips and they come down and attack you for them. That hasn't happened to me yet, but
No,
give them time. They're learning.
they are learning.
Mm.
So I
So
like to
anyway,
think
go on, carry on.
the madness of the seagulls. Oh, sorry, we're going on about seagulls now instead of Marvel.
I know.
The M.
This is the kind of gold you get from us.
Yeah. Oh, we can call it the MC, as in SEA, the MCU.
I
Right.
like what you did there. I'm going to veto it though and go, no, we're going to call it MCU. MCU.
But yeah, I've never fallen prey to the being attacked for my chips thing. But I like to think, right, that this whole thing with seagulls, I like to think it started with just one guy who just went, "Oh, go on, have a chip," and then it.
Yeah, 100%. We owe this to that one selfless, sharing asshole who thought of others before himself. Yeah, no, I know. I firmly believe that and blame him for it all. Is his name Stuart?
Oh, it's not.
I hope not. Okay, good. Anyway, let us not digress any further, because in today's episode we are here to continue our discussion about the MCU and Phase 2. And just as a quick reminder then, Stu, why are we talking about the rise and fall of the MCU?
because I think we need to go through these projects with a fine tooth comb to genuinely kind of establish, like, honestly, for me, I need to figure out where did it actually go wrong for me, because I want to know, is it is it me, as my expectation been set so high because of these films that now nothing pleases me, or is it the fact that the quality of the projects has actually dropped over time? What is it?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, why are we feeling less excited? Why are we not going to the cinema? Why why is it feeling just a bit blah right now when you're watching these new Marvel projects?
Mm.
So yeah, good brief synopsis there. I love it. And oh, I'll tell you what we should have done. We should have done like a previously on What's Your Fandom Phase One. How did we feel about Phase One?
I was happy with this one. Yeah,
Same. Yeah, it was a strong phase,
it was.
except for Hulk.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Mm,
think
mm.
so. What was that? 6 films, right? So
I
yeah,
can't
there was six
remember.
altogether,
Sure.
wasn't
Yeah.
it? So to have one bad out of 6, that's not too bad.
That is really not bad, is it? That's not bad at all. And yeah, we felt like, I think, well, I certainly felt like it was a really good it was a good run, and it did conclude with that Avengers film, the first one, Avengers Assemble,
Yes.
which it felt like a real moment in cinema history where it all came towards that moment, and it all kind of clicked and it worked. So anyway, okay then, on to phase two. So if you are like me and you are having trouble remembering which films are actually in phase two, well, I am going to remind you. You're ready for this? Okay, so the films in this phase were, in release order, Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. So let's discuss them in order, Stuart, as is, well, semi-tradition. We've done it once already, so this is creating a tradition.
Yes.
Iron Man 3.
Mm.
So yeah, directed by Shane Black, also written by Drew Pearce and Shane Black.
Yes.
How do you feel about Iron Man 3? Are you a fan? Did you like?
Uh, this was the
Oh, this is a
first.
good start.
Yeah,
uh,
this no, this was the first film where I came out and it wasn't as hyped. I kind of felt a bit deflated, if I'm honest. There were aspects of the film that I thought were really good. For example, the whole angle of Tony Stark, being traumatized and having this anxiety PTSD. I bought that completely because I thought, yes, he's just encountered aliens for God's sake. He flew up into space in a suit that wasn't meant to fly in space. He's averted nuclear, like a nuke going off, didn't he? And
yeah,
he fought aliens on in New York City. What a road he's come on. You look at where he started off, being
yeah,
kidnapped by terrorists, and now he's fighting aliens.
yeah,
And he is human at the end of the day. So I think that aspect of the story was really interesting. Um, I also liked how, again, they found a way to develop his Iron Man suits like even further. Because I genuinely thought after watching Avengers Assemble, when he gets launched out of the window from Loki, and then the suit latches onto him, like it flies down, catches him. I thought, shit, that's really cool. How
oh,
the
super
hell?
cool.
How is it
Yeah,
going to get better than that? And then he did this thing, didn't he, in Iron Man 3, where like parts of his suit just sort of came to him. Now, visually, I thought it looked amazing that that was happening, the Mark 47. And I also appreciate that they sort of changed the color scheme on it a little bit as well. Like they didn't stick with red and gold, they went with gold and red. So
it's a subtle change, but it's there.
it's there. Yes. Um, so yeah, those parts I liked. I wasn't keen on. What? Still to this day, I don't actually know how I feel about the Mandarin twist. I don't know where I'm
Oh,
at with that because it was funny and like no one saw it coming.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I was like, I think it's because the way they pitched their trailer, it was very, very dark in the trailer. And you think, seeing the light go out on his chest piece at the end of the trailer, and he's dragging like the leftovers of his suit in this blizzard snow, and you think, oh my god, he's really up against it here, and he was in the film. But I think because then I think this was like the first sort of taste of like the Marvel humor coming through for me. Where
I think you're
do you get
right.
what I
I
mean?
think, yeah, I do. The kind of changing oh, it's it's one of those things. I think that all films about us humans need to have humor and sadness and tension and scares and action and quiet moments. And I think because to be human is to have all of those things, isn't it?
Mm,
But you can certainly tell that whilst they're dealing with this quite serious story for Tony, in that he is dealing, like you said, with his PTSD. I think that the villain then, you kind of expect the villain to match that in tone, don't you? And so
mm,
they're going along, and for the most part, until the twist where you realize that Ben Kingsley isn't the Mandarin, he's an actor who's been hired to play the Mandarin.
mm.
And it did pull the rug out from under your feet. And I think I remember the first time I saw it, I remember thinking, oh, what? That's, oh, okay. And then it didn't surprise me in a oh, that's clever kind of way. It surprised me in a, oh, right. And then it was, who was actually the Mandarin? What's his name? Guy Pearce.
Yes, yeah.
He was revealed as the actual Mandarin. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think after the initial shock of it, since then I've enjoyed the twist, and I've
Mm,
enjoyed the kind of addition of that humorous light element, because obviously the further we go down this route down the MCU, the MCU highway, we get more and more stop offs at Humorville, don't we? And
yes.
Laugh Town and Giggle Garage. Okay, stopping now. Um, but yeah, it's definitely something that they do get kind of lighter and lighter and lighter, and then I think they're trying to match the the devastation that comes along with the story, where like cities and worlds are being destroyed. They've got to have some humor and some light stuff over here to try and balance it out, and sometimes they don't get it right. And I
Mm,
think with this one, I always found the Iron Man films, they do have humor in them, and this one does as well, but a kind of dry, sarcastic, quick-witted humor,
mm.
not a silly, camp kind of over-the-top humor. I think it's different.
Yeah, yeah,
So this, you're right. This is the first time they're changing gear.
yes. And let's face it, we obviously had high going into that film because it's an Iron Man movie.
Not just that, it is the first film after Avengers, which we have to remember was so successful, so well received, made so much money. I can't remember the figure now. Go back and listen to our previous episode. It's all in there. But it was a huge jump from what they were making on all the individual films. It was a massive leap forward in money. So
Yes,
it clearly was a runaway success. And this then was an epilogue to that, with
yes,
the main man dealing with the trauma of what just happened. And actually, this is quite a brave move they took.
yep, yep. Showing a more vulnerable side to Tony Stark. Yes.
I quite like the you know, I gotta say, I think I fall on the side of fan of this film. I quite enjoy this film. I think I enjoy the bit where he is stranded in the middle of America with only that young boy to help him,
Mm,
and he needs that escape. He has to run away from what's just happened. It's the only way that Tony knows how to deal with it, other than being, locked in a cave when he was captured in the first film and becoming Iron Man. This is sort of an echo of that, and this time he's locked himself away in a barn in the middle of nowhere where no one knows where he is,
yeah.
and he has to become Iron Man again.
Yes.
Quite like that.
Yeah, I think to be fair, I think I do need to watch the film again because I think I watched it in the cinema, and I think I maybe watched it once like after that. So I really haven't seen it that many times,
Oh,
but
okay.
I just remember being a little bit um gutted about it. I don't know why. But interestingly, I want to talk about War Machine really quickly.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they changed his suit in this film.
Yes. Yes.
Well, when that came out in the trailer, um, the suit he's wearing is the Iron Patriot suit.
Yes.
Now, I was really interested to see what they were going to do with that because in the comic books, um, the Iron Patriot suit wasn't actually worn by Rhodey.
Okay.
It was actually worn, and this is where I think they would have had the issue. It belonged to Norman Osborn,
Ooh, I see.
and at the time, well, still now, he's a Sony product,
Yes.
so they couldn't put him in the suit.
No,
So
problematic.
instead, they managed to get around it by putting Rhodey in the suit, and which I didn't mind. It
I
looked
think it
cool.
works, to be honest. I mean, I didn't know that history, so it didn't deviate from anything for me, and it felt fine.
Yeah, I think it's in um, I think in the storyline in the comic books, I'm sure Norman Osborn takes over Shield, and I'm sure he renames it like Hammer or something.
Oh,
So he then has his own, um, his own sort of organization,
yeah.
and yeah, So he basically, so he changes it from Shield and he calls it Hammer, and yeah, he is the wearer of the Iron Patriot suit.
Well, that is very, very interesting.
Mm.
I have to ask you how you feel about the whole Gwyneth Paltrow's character sort of becoming superhuman and kind of saving the day,
Um, well, it's a change from the whole damsel in distress thing.
which can
Um,
only be a good thing.
yes, yes, totally. They seem to be quite sort of aware of that um, at the time, didn't they? Like they were very kind of
Yes,
ahead of it there. It was cool seeing her in the Iron Man suit.
it
That was
was.
awesome. Now,
Yeah,
obviously, that was at the time that was a nod to the fact that Pepper has her own suit in the comics called Rescue.
right.
So I think fans thought like, "Oh, are we going to get to see her in the rescue suit?" Whereas like, not really. Um,
Yeah.
like Tony's just going to stick it on her just to protect her, and then she ends up like saving him. I think, if I remember rightly, that's when their house gets the
She
penthouse gets
does. Yeah,
destroyed.
yeah. She ends up saving him, and oh yeah, she puts yeah, that's right. He puts her in the suit to save her from the blast whilst the house is being destroyed, and
Yes.
then he gets shot off somewhere to where he ends up in his little solitude moment,
Mm.
and then at the end where she's been juiced up with all that you know MacGuffin
Oh, the
magic
extremis.
science,
The
yeah,
extremis.
yeah, that makes her get really hot and be able to destroy things. And she kind of helps save the day, then save him from a souped up, what's his name? Guy Pearce. Can never
Yes.
remember Guy Pearce's name. It's there on the tip of my brain every time. I can never say it.
It's
And then, of
Ulrich
course,
Killian, isn't it?
oh, there we go. Yeah. Then, of course, it does end with Tony having that surgery to remove the bits of shrapnel that are headed towards his heart,
Yes.
which was quite a nice kind of, well, conclusion in a way to that story as well.
Yeah. Now, this is where it gets interesting because the whole removing of the shrapnel thing, like, you could argue, like, why did he decide to do it then? Why couldn't you have done that sooner or whatever? But, like, even if you kind of go, oh, that's just how the story is, I was totally fine with it because for the sake of story moving forward, you could do without that hindrance because we've seen him struggle with it since the first Iron Man film.
Yes.
Hooked up to a car battery.
Yeah.
Iron Man 2, he's got, it's killing him, isn't it? It was poisoning him,
Yeah.
poisoning his
Yeah.
blood. So it makes sense why they went down that route. I do find it strange that they made the decision for him to just blow up all his suits.
What the ones he'd been saving, the ones he'd been developing since he
Yeah,
has, yeah. I think well, I think he's very clever as a character, and I think that he is obviously headed towards Ultron further
Mm,
down the line, and so he's getting this idea that perhaps he isn't only responsible for saving the world. Perhaps what that's supposed to mean, that like he needed all those suits to come and save them all from that big fight at the end of this particular film,
mm,
and then he was like, it's now we need to move forward now and not do things the way we did them before. And
mm,
actually that's thematically quite apt as well, because in removing the shrapnel at this point, he is then moving forward, he's choosing to be Iron Man and to wear the suit and to do all that, because he doesn't need that thing there to keep him alive anymore.
yeah,
He is choosing to become the hero. And I
yeah,
think throughout the whole thing he was a bit of a reluctant hero, wasn't he? And that selflessness at the end of Avengers Assemble, where he did take the nuke up into space, that was a massive character development for him. And I think he's just got to come to terms with all that. And so the end of this film, I think that is a metaphor for him choosing his path as
yeah.
Iron Man now moving forward.
Totally buy that, right? But do you
Mm,
think? I just wondering where you stand on this, right? He
mm,
has a there's a scene in Avengers Assemble where he's talking to Bruce Banner, and
hmm
Bruce Banner is very reluctant to Hulk out,
hmm
and Tony piece, and he says, "I've got shrapnel going to my heart. This stops it." And then he basically says, so he kind of embraces the fact that he has it, and then like in the
hmm
next film, he's removing it. And I'm just wondering, is it Tony Stark? Is Iron Man 3 about Tony Stark learning what it really takes to become Iron Man? Do you get me? Rather than just accepting, well, this is now a part of me. Has he
I
evolved his
do.
thinking?
But I think he has, but he's also evolving his limitations. I mean, up until the end of that film, he didn't know the stakes were so big,
Mm,
and he goes through that massive fight in New York where most of the city has been destroyed, and I think that does change him
yeah,
so much. And he needs to go through that change, not only to kind of understand what is at stake, but to allow him to think now, well, if that's what the stakes are, we need to figure out how we're going to protect the world.
yeah,
And I think that's what changed. I think at that point, he's right. This is a part of him. He's embraced what it means to be Iron Man up to that point,
mm,
given what he's been through up to that point. But then
yes,
everything does change after New York,
yes,
and then this is the film where he is like, yeah, I have actually changed. I'm
yes,
not just that sarky guy who did announce I'm Iron Man on the news because I thought it was cool. He now has other motives and
yes,
morals. I think he's just learning and learning all the time to become the hero that he does.
yes.
Hmm.
It's a very good one.
Interestingly, then, Iron Man as well, Iron Man 3, the figures for Iron Man 3, and this really surprised me. So, worldwide, at the box office, the film grossed over $1.2 billion. Dollars.
Wow.
Remember that figure as we move on, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is very significant.
Yes.
So the next film in the franchise of the MCU Phase 2 is Thor: The Dark World. What are your thoughts, Stuart?
Mm. Yeah. No, again, I think I say I had a bit of a sour taste after watching Iron Man 3. Um, so because my expectations from the trailer weren't really met, I was when it came to like the next one, I was like, oh please let this one be good. But Thor: The Dark World, man, it's I don't I don't know, I think the story's rather weak in it, if I'm being honest. I think it has such a powerful story in the first film, like we talked about it in the previous episode about Thor's, um, almost like a sort of like his prodigal son kind of storyline.
Yeah.
Having to prove his worth. That's such a powerful start to that character. Um, And then with Thor: The Dark World, I felt like this film was made just for the sake of them showing the ether, which obviously becomes the reality stone.
Hmm.
And I feel like that was the it was a means to an end in that way. I don't feel like Thor as a character was. I don't know. I don't think he developed that much. I mean, the only thing, the only kind of after effect for him really was nothing to do with Avengers Assemble. It was more to do with, the Frost Giant War from the first Thor movie. So in Thor 2, he has to go around now, doesn't he, and try and clean up all his mess.
Hmm.
Um, the only, like I say, you do see him become a little bit wiser, and you see the conversations he has with Odin, and that he's trying to learn now, what does it really take to rule and to be a king and stuff. But yeah, there's something about this film that just didn't land for me.
I think uh, I've got a bit of a soft spot for this film. I know it's not the best, right?
Mm,
Just putting it out there. It's not the best. There's just something about this film that did click for me. Now, I enjoyed the Dark Elves
mm,
as villains, but I think they were a bit two-dimensional.
yes.
So I do, there's a critique there, but I'm also quite intrigued by them because we don't know much about them, and they were quite formidable,
Mm,
at that point, and I think they could have been even more formidable if they'd been given a bit more depth, you know.
yeah.
Um, in terms of Thor and his story, though, I think you're right. I don't think there is much of a narrative for Thor as a character. I don't think he does really change from start to end of this film. It just feels like a bit of an action film, a
Yes.
fantasy action film with a mystical, magical stone that they've got to defeat, and it's got a mystical, magical enemy. And you're right; it's an exercise in sort of ticking a box because they had to bring the next stone into it somehow, the Infinity Stones, and this is how they did it. I
Mm,
mean, but and yet I still have the thing. For me, this is a really good Sunday afternoon Marvel film. I'd be quite happy if this was on. I was just flicking through the channels and it was there. Like, oh yeah, I'll put this on, and then I get a cup of tea and I watch this.
mm,
It's strangely comforting. I don't know what that is, what that's all about. Perhaps because it's filmed and set a lot in Britain. Um, I do enjoy Natalie Portman in this film,
yeah.
as well as the rest of the cast. To be fair, Tom Hiddleston and Idris Elba, Christopher Eccleston,
Of
who
course.
we all know I'm a big fan of, um, who doesn't have that much to do, but is quite, I don't know, quite mysterious and dark and evil.
Yes.
But I just think it doesn't it doesn't have those big plot moments or character moments that we, I think, expect from a lot of Marvel films. Other than that one scene where we think Loki has actually died,
Yes.
and he actually died helping to save his brother. And we thought, okay, if that was Loki's actual death, I feel like the film would have actually carried a lot more weight.
Yes. Yeah.
Is
That.
this the film where his mother dies?
Yes.
Yes, so something does happen, but because she's kind of a minor character, this is terrible to say,
Mm,
but it doesn't have that big an effect on the audience, I don't think.
no. No, I agree. I think. Yeah. If it was like if it was Odin, I think it would have had a bit more sort of impact, especially given that when you look at Thor and Odin's relationship at that point, they've obviously made up, and now Thor realizes like I'm going to listen to my father, and you know hopefully I can become a greater king as he can. So with that in mind, if they then killed off Odin, the impact would be so much more powerful because now it's
Yes.
like shit. Now Thor's on his own. So has he really got it in him to be king?
And I think actually, as a character, this was the time to have done that
Yes.
because he's it would have been a really having just dealt with the seriousness of Iron Man for Tony in Iron Man 3. Well, it would have been nice to have had as kind of serious a story for Thor. But having said that, perhaps because of the seriousness of Iron Man 3, they didn't want to go down that route straight afterwards because this would have been released about 6 months later.
Yes.
The next chapter. Perhaps they wanted just like a big fantasy romp, action film. I say romp. It's not really a romp. It's not that funny. This is before Thor gets funny. Um, and it's interesting because this is very much, you're right, like a sequel to the style of Thor 1, which kind of, these two films are their own thing, and then the next two Thor films are their own thing,
Mm,
and they do feel quite different.
yes. Yes, I agree. Like I say, I think the highlight for this film for me is Loki's sort of alleged betrayal of
Yeah,
Thor,
yeah,
and I think that was good because it showed, his level of trickery, and it's sort
yeah,
of like it's like a double whammy, isn't it? Because you're watching it thinking like, oh, he just betrayed Thor, but then it's actually like, oh, also he tricked me into thinking he was dead,
yes,
and that was good. So when
it
that
was good.
final scene, I don't know if it was a post credit or if it was just the final scene of the film, when Odin's on the throne, and he turns into Loki.
I
That was
think it's the
very,
last scene.
yes, I believe it
Yeah,
is. So that's the only development for Thor actually in terms of the character in that film. Now that I just realized, is assuming that he thinks he's talking to Odin rather than Loki. He basically says, "I'm not. I don't want the throne. I'm not ready to be a king yet." So he's obviously taken something away from the events of that film, where he
so is
feels.
that, yeah, you're right, is that because he loves Jane?
I think
Is
so.
because he doesn't, he like zoom back to London and they end up kissing. That's the kind of fine. That's the post credit scene, isn't it? Where he kind of lands in her flat and they both end up schnogging on
Yes,
like a balcony, and then it's like, oh, love conquers all, and then of course Jane disappears.
that's right. Yes,
So this is another thing. Perhaps the impact of Thor 2 is lost because of what doesn't happen next for Thor.
yes,
And it takes a long time to get to the next film of his
yes. It does.
as well. So perhaps he's a victim of timing here.
Hmm.
This could have been perhaps a nice place to bring in a new film, like perhaps bring Ant-Man in at this point
Yes,
and develop Thor a little bit later on, because they very much, I think with Thor, it feels like they're trying to figure out how to do Thor and how to get it right.
yes,
And he's the one who has changed, quite significantly across all of the films.
yes.
Hmm. In terms of money, though, Thor 2, The Dark World, grossed over 644 million.
Wow,
So that is half of what Iron Man 3 grossed.
wow.
Hmm. That's really interesting to me.
Yes.
It does say here that it was deemed a success in terms of money, but it took half as much as Iron Man 3 did.
Hmm.
Hmm. Food for thought there, Stuart. Food for thought.
Totally.
But shall we move on to the
We
third
shall.
film in this phase two, which is Captain America, the Winter Soldier? How do you feel?
Oh, very happy about this one.
Ooh, tell me why.
Well, I like the tone of the film because it's more kind of action packed, but you get to see Captain America now where he's not in an environment, that's like old fashioned and campy like you see in First Avenger.
Yeah,
Now you're seeing a Captain America that's working for Shield. So how does this super soldier adapt to a modern day world when he's on the,
yeah,
and I really like that. Um, I also admire the fact that they gave him like a new suit as well because they didn't have. Um, but like with Iron Man suits and it's like function or whatever. So he just like, oh, I'll just build that myself. Whereas in
Yes,
this, he's got more of a sort of a shield uniform,
he
um,
does.
and I
Yeah.
quite like that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I thought this was a really, really strong film. Um, although at the time of its release, I didn't know anything about the Winter Soldier, so I didn't know who it was, and it was it was accidentally spoiled for me because
Oh
they had a
no.
yeah, but it was spoiled by Chris Evans. Um, because
Oh.
yeah, but I think they were trying to do a thing of going, oh, we all know who Winter Soldier is, so we're just going to say it. I think it was one of those kind of situations.
Oh.
I think they just sort of just put it out there, I think. So yeah, I was watching some sort of Sky like special thing, and Chris Evans was talking about he's nice to work with Sebastian Stan again, and they were
Yeah.
saying like, "Oh, Bucky's back now, and he's the Winter Soldier," and they just kind of just said it, similar to you'll know which Harry Potter film was Dumbledore where he dies. Is that Half Blood Prince?
Yes.
So they made a point, didn't they, in like all the interviews and stuff of saying like, yes, he does die in this film, and
Hmm.
they they didn't want the whole spoiler thing. Bit of a risk, but okay, I guess it sort of
It
paid
is a
off.
risk, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah. Different. Hmm.
very different. But no, yeah, I did very much like the Winter Soldier film. I liked the that angle of Hydra had infiltrated Shield, so now
Yes.
Cap's sort of um, not his morals as such, but like you know he was following orders from the top, and now the top has become the bottom.
Uh-huh.
um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so now he's like, well, what the hell? And then, but because he's Captain America, he knows inside the right thing to do. So he's still able to save the day because he's Steve Rogers. And I quite like that.
You're right. It's interesting, isn't it? You are right. His morals. No, you're right. It is kind of his morals, or his understanding of morality in this time is what changes in this film.
Yes.
So he's very much in the last time we saw him in Avengers Assemble, he was still very much, the gung ho, we must fight to save everyone. We are good and we are American. And I know I said that in the British accent, but it's the only way I know how to say gung ho. Um and but you know what I'm saying. He was
Yes.
he was very much a fish out of time and water.
Yeah.
So in this film, it's the kind of the muddying up of the black and white and the making of the grey, which is where all the interesting emotions are. And I think that's where we find Steve Rogers in this film trying to figure out and trying to find his place and having the agency that he has committed to be the villain. He, makes him question everything,
Mm.
and makes him question whether, even if he should be following orders,
Yeah.
or it's a fascinating new dynamic, and having it be Bucky as well, I think was a really good move. It was quite an obvious move,
Mm.
but it was still a good one
Yes.
because we were all a bit like, "Oh, wait a second, didn't he die? This is interesting. How are they bringing him back?" And that was quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, can I tell you a story about when I went to see this film? Because I went to see this in the cinema in Copenhagen. Jay and I were on holiday, and it was one of those rare nights we just thought, let's go and do something different. And they had this absolutely stunning cinema that was an old. I mean, it looked like a palace. It had like turrets and it was a very, very extravagant building, and it was all different colors, and it was like pink and blue and yellow. It was wild. I remember thinking, what is that building over there? And it was a cinema. We thought, cool, let's go to that. And you went in, and it was all marble and pillars, and it was really shocking when you know what cinemas we get in this country, what they look like. The foyers look like what they do. And I remember walking and thinking, Jesus is mental. And it was so busy, properly busy. And it was like, wow, we only ever get cinemas like that on like big opening weekends. I don't think it was a big opening weekend. It was like a midweek. We just happened to be in Copenhagen, as one does. And we bought our tickets upstairs, went downstairs to the film, and obviously it was in English, but they had subtitles for the Danish. I remember it was just such a lavish, interesting, experience at the cinema that I just thoroughly enjoyed.
Wow.
And I remember seeing the film and I liking the film, but actually, for me, this film has grown to be one of my favourites upon repeat viewing,
Mm.
rather than the first watch of it. It was absolutely fine first watch, but it had more. It's got more that I enjoy. It's very, very rewatchable.
Yes.
I think because it's kind of like soldiers and spies and conspiracies, and that kind of the mystery element is quite interesting.
Yes. Yeah, it's very good. And the choreography for this film is really good as well. Um, there's so many like standout scenes in this movie. I could talk all day about it, but I mean, seeing like when Captain America when he lands on that boat at the start,
Yes,
and there's just that one guy that he just boots off the boat. It's like shit.
but doesn't he have that epic fight with like like an MMA fighter or something? Isn't
Ah,
that on that boat?
yeah,
He's like,
GSP, George St. Pierre.
yeah, he has like that. That is cool. I enjoy that fight.
Yes, yes. And I don't know about you, but for me, the highlight of that movie, which is quite difficult to pick because there's so many amazing scenes, the elevator scene.
Oh, it's classic.
That is the best.
It's so good. It's so good. And fascinatingly, I have two fascinating facts for you. Okay, so I'll tell you the money first, actually, because this one, um, it grossed. I have to find it on the page because I've just scrolled. I've been scrolling because I've been so excited. This grossed $714 million worldwide, so
Nice.
more than Thor: The Dark World,
Yeah.
but not quite as much as Iron Man 3. But really, really interestingly enough, the screenplay for this film, the screenwriters rather, are the
Yeah.
same screenwriters as Thor: The Dark World.
Really?
Yes.
No, I didn't know that.
Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely wrote them both.
Wow.
Yes, so the director is Alan Taylor of Thor, and then the Russo brothers do Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much clout the directors had in developing or changing things
Mm,
as they were making or as they were editing, because there's a
yeah.
whole art form to that. But it's fascinating that these two films have the same writers.
That's crazy, isn't it? And I think with Russo brothers as well, I think after people watch Winter Soldier, I think very much like let those guys do more Marvel movies. I
Yes,
think that was the general consensus of it, wasn't it?
yeah, they made a really good impression. It felt big without being showy. It felt it's got a certain look, actually. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. When you look at it from a film point of view, like how the scenes have all been set up, it's got quite a different look to the others, and
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Interesting, but we move on. The next film, Curveball, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Ah, Guardians.
Oh, what are your memories of seeing this then?
Well, Guardians, I remember seeing the trailer and I was not particularly excited. I was just like,
Same.
what the hell is this? Like, it was just
Yeah.
never, I think I'd get on with it because I was like, the only space kind of, um, the space projects I like is, like Star Wars, which I'm familiar with. So
Hmm.
this was a bit, oh, this is new, so I wasn't sure, but pleasantly surprised when I watched this film.
Hmm.
Very surprised, and I couldn't believe how funny it was.
Now then, you hit the nail on the head there. This very much the turning point,
Mm,
I think. This is one of the ones I didn't go to see in the cinema. I think that I saw Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America in the cinema, and obviously they are all sequels to what we've already known. And this is the point they're choosing to bring in the Guardians, and it is wildly different in tone, in style, in visuals. Up until this point, the only space thing we've seen, space kind of society, was Thor, wasn't it? And that's wildly different to everything else. And then this is wildly different to that. So I
Mm.
was like, oh, this is a step in another direction. But you hit the nail on the head there. This is where the humor starts.
Yes.
This is definitely where they change and they realize that the comedy is just as big a character in the film as everything else is.
Yes.
But not in a bad way. This is a very good film.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. I think I do remember watching it in the cinema, and there were certain scenes, and like, the whole audience was laughing, and it's like everyone got it, like, like, because there's some humor you see in, like, you know, there's like little funny scenes in like Thor and Iron Man films, which kind of, they're funny, but in a more kind of subtle way, with a bit more kind of
Yes.
charm.
Yes.
Like when Thor walks into a pet shop asking for a horse, like, that's
Yeah.
funny.
It is.
But like, yeah, with Guardians, it was like sort of next level kind of. This is just like wacky funny, like, and because of the array of characters you've got, you've got Star Lord who's like listening to his Walkman. You've got a talking raccoon. You've got a fucking tree. Like, it's just, what's going on? Like, but no, a very good film. I also like weirdly though, the funniest film of that phase, right? I would argue, right? Yet it's got one of the darkest, like, sort of openings.
Yeah, you're right.
Isn't that strange?
It it is and it isn't because I think kind of like what I said earlier, when you've got something that's so serious and so sad, I think the only way to deal with it is to snap to the real funny.
Hmm.
And so I think it kind of makes sense, but it's a completely tragic opening for this film and this character that I think we automatically like. We
Yes.
like him straight away, possibly because we know what he went through as a kid, possibly because he's so handsome, possibly because he's dancing around that alien planet, kicking things, shooting things, flying over things with his little Walkman on. He's
Yes.
just straight away he's endearing, isn't he? I think people just thought, yeah, he's cool, we like him. And then as the film moves on, we get to see like the planet they're on. Is it Nova? I want to say
Yes.
Nova. Yeah,
Yes.
and I
It is.
remember thinking that was visually so beautiful and it just looked so expensive. I know that's like a weird thing to say, but now we're getting to see the spoils of the Marvel money. What they can do. I mean, I love the sequence where they're all in jail in that prison. For some
Yes.
reason, I love that whole portion of the film. Really does make me smile when I think of it. I really liked it, and it's
Yes.
wacky, it's wild.
It is.
But then
Yes.
the Infinity Stone doesn't feel shoehorned into this one.
No. No, it
Hmm.
doesn't, does it? Although nobody seems to know what it is, and I quite like that.
Yeah, same.
Like, the only person that knows is Thanos, and um, obviously he's got Ronan the Accuser, to try and retrieve it.
I think he's
Um,
quite a good villain. I'm gonna put that out there.
Ronan,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so.
as
I
in,
think
I thought he was quite scary to look at
he
and
was.
menacingly played, and he seemed quite like he'd be difficult to defeat.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I do like. I like the character development for the Guardians, and this was really cool because obviously it's not just about Peter Quill. It's you got like Rocket and Groot are like their sort of buddy cop like duo thing going on,
Yeah, yeah,
um, getting up to all kinds of shenanigans, which is funny. Also, Drax's story is surprisingly quite heartfelt, considering he's the muscle and he's the brute
yeah,
of the group, and yet he's got like one of the most. He's probably got like the strong motivation out of all of them to go for
yeah,
Ronan.
yeah.
So yeah, really interesting. And Batista, like Dave Batista. I mean, obviously I've seen him from like watching like wrestling when I was younger and stuff like that.
Right.
Honestly, he surprised the shit out of me in that film. I didn't think he would have been that good
Yeah,
because I've always seen him as this like this tough wrestler who's like power bombing people, and he's a beast in the ring and stuff. So to see him be funny, I was like, oh my god, this is like perfect casting.
Yeah,
Like
it
he's
is.
Drax. It's fucking great. Like,
Mm, mm,
so I was pleasantly surprised for that. Like, and
mm.
yeah, very good.
We can't not mention the soundtrack.
Oh,
It just, you know, completely kind of changed what they did. I mean, the soundtrack in Iron Man was always very good,
hmm,
and I don't think since then has there been such an iconic soundtrack to a Marvel film.
no, I do. Like I said, I remember when I went to see Guardians. I don't know if it was on the same day or the day after, but yeah, I went into HMV and I bought awesome,
Nice.
and I bought a graphic novel as well because I was like, oh, I wonder what are the Guardians all about?
Yeah,
Pick up a graphic novel as well, a sort of a modern one, just like a random one that was there.
yeah,
Um, it was an okay read, like, but the film was more entertaining because it was the film as well. But the soundtrack, yeah, absolutely. As you said, Iron Man 2 had the AC/DC soundtrack.
yeah,
I remember having like the CD of that. Like I think it was, I'm thinking, oh, this is good. This is pretty badass. And these guys in there, like in the suits and all that. I was like, oh, this is cool. But yeah, with Guardians, it was such like an eclectic mix of music. But you could always picture the scenes playing out as you're listening to the tracks.
yeah, yeah. It's like automatic music videos. It's bizarre, and I
Mm,
suppose it's an eclectic mix of music for a very eclectic film. It's an eclectic cast, an eclectic characters,
yes.
eclectic sets, worlds. The whole thing is just a mishmash of so many things,
Yeah.
and yet it just clicked and worked. And this has got to be James Gunn's input.
Yeah.
It's got to have been from him because we've seen that consistently from him since as well.
Yes.
So this I think genuinely this film is a turning point for the MCU. Whether that is a good or a bad thing is yet to be seen.
Mm,
I think because this does change the tone of a lot of things. This was very successful. I mean, in terms of money, this took over $773 million worldwide. So more than Captain America, more than Thor, but not quite as much as Iron Man 3.
wait, what was the figure again?
$773 million.
Oh, right. Man.
Mm.
Well, that makes
So yeah,
sense.
it's done. It did really well for them as a start of a new um, sequence of film, a new characters, new trilogy, new everything, but
Mm,
also the film before the Age of Ultron. This is quite strangely placed,
mm,
but I guess that Thanos is quite a strange villain in a way, and he kind of like he fits into the Guardians world.
yes.
So by bringing this in now, it kind of lays the groundwork for that as we
Yes.
move forward.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And obviously, the next film then is Avengers: Age of Ultron, which I have a bit of a strange relationship with this film because I tend to not really think of it. I think when I think of the MCU, it's one of the last ones I think of when I remember. It
Mm,
doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that at all. It just it just was just, it wasn't perhaps as good as some of the others, or didn't perhaps affect me as much as some of the others did. However, when I do put it on and watch it again now, and I have watched it several times since, um, I do enjoy it, and I'm like, oh, this is actually quite a good one. But
yeah.
it's kind of put under the radar a bit. What do you think?
I think so. Yeah. I think knowing that, like, we're getting a second Avengers movie, I think people were, I mean, I was concerned. I was like, oh, I wonder who the villain's going to be this time, and how are they going to do things like differently, and what's going to be the threat level. Um, but yeah, I totally know what you mean. It's not as hyped as the first Avengers film.
No.
Um, I think, yeah, it's weird. It's not as I don't think it's as action packed either. I mean, there are action
No,
sequences in
there
it, but
are, yeah, but it doesn't. It's kind of more character driven.
mm,
It's still it's obviously it's a sequel for Tony Stark from Iron Man 3, who obviously went through what he did, and this is an extension of that now.
yeah,
That sort of the PTSD and trauma kind of sending him down this rabbit hole of, this obsession really of the need to protect the earth because he can't go through what he went through last time. He can't go through that again, that trauma again. It really
mm,
did scar him, and it fuels all this whole thing for Ultron. So it's a
yeah,
direct sequel, kind of from a character perspective of that, um, which is quite interesting.
yes, yeah, yeah. 'Cause it's quite mad how like he's, obviously he's responsible for the creation of Ultron,
Hmm.
but Ultron ends up being, not quite what he is. They said, didn't they? Like Ultron was kind of like almost like an extreme Tony Stark in
Yes.
the sense like, oh, he wants to protect the world, whereas Ultron is like he wants to protect it so much that he can see like, well, because humans are the ones causing all the damage. If I kill them, then I really will protect the Earth.
Hmm.
And I like that they did that the way that they put a bit of Tony Stark's sort of ideology into Ultron.
Yeah.
So that made a lot of sense. I also love the CGI for Ultron as well
It's great.
because he's not just like a big metal robot. Like you can see, you know, like on his face and stuff, like the when he's talking, the way his expressions move, and the way he holds himself,
Oh,
and he's genuinely quite intimidating.
yeah. I mean, James Spader plays him to perfection.
Yes.
He does elevate that part because that part could have been very flat. And I think it's really important actually to have for Tony to have that mirror has up against him, being like, "This is what way the route you're going down. This obsession, post trauma. Like we understand all your intentions are good. We really, really do. But this is where it's leading. Ultron is you, but an extreme version."
Mm.
For me, standout sequence for me is the chase when is Vision being made, the
Oh,
body of Vision is being made for Ultron, and the Black Widow and Captain America and all that are chasing that lorry down the freeways and things. I absolutely love that. I think that's banging.
yes. It's a very good. It's a very good sequence. Um, yeah, I quite like that, and I thought it was quite cool as well that like we're talking about characters that sort of upgrade their gear and stuff. The first time Captain America sort of managed to upgrade his shield in this film because now it had a
Oh,
feature in it where if Nick got stuck, he could like hit a button on his forearm and he would
oh yes.
call the shield back.
Mm,
So,
I remember. Mm.
and strangely, I don't know if you ever remember the trailer for Age of Ultron, but they played a slow version of "I've Got No Strings" from the Pinocchio.
Oh, they did.
It
I
did,
remember
and
it
it.
now you've said it. Yeah.
But I think it's because the reason they did it. Obviously, you got the parallel of Ultron has no strings, isn't it? Because he says that in the film "Is on me."
Yeah.
Um, but also, um, I remember like finding out at the time being quite. This was the first. I'm sure this was the first Marvel movie whereby Disney had bought Marvel Studios.
Oh, now that's an interesting point. I wonder.
I think it was. I know it was the
It
same.
does say here distributed by Walt Disney Studios.
Yeah,
And go down to Guardians. No, Guardians was also distributed by it.
I think it was
Was that
2013. I think so.
all right?
Possibly at the start of this phase. Then that's probably when they acquired the rights.
Yeah.
And
And actually, that is also something we have to mention because that will also change the direction of these films.
mm,
This new money from this new studio and these new executives with their ideas.
yeah,
Very interesting.
yeah, yeah. Because I just remember in Phase One, like it was Paramount that did the first Iron Man film.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
because yeah, Marvel Studios didn't become a thing, did it, until much later on, if I remember.
True, true. Are you a fan of this film then?
I do like it. Again, it's got some really sort of standout moments, isn't it? I think the sequence of them all trying to lift Thor's hammer at the party.
Oh, I love that.
That was just I think the way it was shot was quite interesting as well. Like the camera angle, it's almost like looking up at them, almost from the
Yes.
hammer's perspective, but not quite.
Yes, I see what you mean.
And them struggling, and obviously like everybody had the same look on their face as Thor when like Cap kind of like moves it.
Oh, I love that.
It's like, oh shit,
I
like
love
that's
that. What a
that's huge.
moment.
But what I loved about that is they did that, and then for Captain America at least, they left that for fucking ages. It's not
Yep.
like, oh, by the end of the film he'll do it. No, no, no. You have to
Oh
wait
no.
years.
Yeah. But what a payoff that is when it finally does happen.
Yes. Yeah, it's
Oh.
a very big
Mm,
moment.
it
Al-
is.
Although I do like seeing Vision doing it was quite funny.
Yes, that's true. That was done for humor, wasn't it? Yeah. I
Yeah,
quite like Vision,
Vision's good.
but but I but in the nicest possible way, I don't really miss him.
No?
No, I feel like in terms of character, we've seen it all now, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. At this point, him coming in, I thought, ooh, this is a very, very powerful being,
Yes.
and we need him on our side.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
quite like that. That kind of everyone like, oh, where's he gonna fall? What's this AI gonna do? Because look what the other one's just done.
Yeah. Yeah. What makes them different, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Which I thought that was quite it's an interesting blend, with Vision, isn't it? Because he's got like the consciousness of Jarvis. He's got vibranium on the android suit, and also he's, kind of been programmed by Tony Stark as well.
Hmm.
So it's kind of because he says in the film that he's Ultron, but like the way Ultron was intended to be.
Well, you could argue at this point that he is a combination of lots of things. Like he
Yeah.
has the Infinity Stone, obviously as well. He has a piece of Iron Man, a piece of Captain America, and a piece of Thor, and the combination of them all is what
Yes.
makes him good and a hero. Whereas Ultron is the product of kind of just Tony in his spiral.
Yeah.
So it's a metaphor again for Tony to see that he needs these people around him to be the team in order to survive and to win and to protect.
Yeah.
That's what I took from that.
Yes. No, that is right. I think, yeah, Vision. I can see what you mean about Vision, right? Because he wasn't as he wasn't as widely utilized as he should have been in some ways. Like he
Mm.
pops up in a lot of films
He does.
and he's there, but like he's not the kind of character that would have his own solo film, is he?
No, I think this could very well be a problem from a writing perspective. But then I think to myself, how do you write a character arc for this, well, machine, I
Mm,
guess, learning to be more human? And I think it's done fantastically in one division, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
yes.
At this point in time, he performs the function he needs to for this film for our heroes to win.
Yes.
And I think that's great because he does he's a cool character. I love like when he sees Thor's cape and he just like makes himself a cape. I kind of like that.
Is that why he does it? Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of looks and you see you look down and he looks back up to Thor and then he's got a cape then too and you're like, oh, there we go.
I didn't actually
You know,
realize that's why he did it. I thought he just
yeah.
did it because, yeah.
So he is not just made from a piece of all of our heroes. He's learning and is influenced by them as well as a
Yeah.
team, as a crew, and so that's how he becomes who he becomes. And obviously, this is where we get Wanda for the first time as well. This is her coming in. Um, I have to kind of follow up my comments from the last episode about Avengers Assemble in the I discussed how Joss Whedon writes his characters and his dialogue has a certain rhythm,
Oh,
and
yes.
it sometimes pulls me out of the narrative. Now, weirdly, in Age of Ultron, it is still there, but I feel like it is muted. So I don't know whether that's a case of it's it has been intentionally toned down a bit to make it a bit more neutral and a bit more in coherence with the other films that we've seen. Because by this point, there's been quite a lot of films, and these characters have been in quite a few stories already, and for them to suddenly start speaking differently
Mm.
in their it's all about the actual words and where they come in the sentence. It's very strange, and I know that it's very like I got my nerd tin hat on right now,
Yes.
but like it is something that doesn't really bother me as much in this film.
Mm.
And of course, this is the last of Joss Whedon's part in this franchise, isn't it?
Yes.
This is him leaving,
Yeah.
and I think I think good. In a way. I mean, we have to talk about Joss Whedon again at length. I think in another discussion, but I think at this point he's done those two. It's time to let somebody else take over and do something else, because
Mm.
otherwise they're going to become. Because in terms of its structure, Ultron is a very similar structure to Assemble, and they all kind of have to come together, figure out how to work together, and win.
Yes.
It's not there's not much more to it in terms of structure. And it's a
No.
winning structure, don't get me wrong, but we can't keep on seeing the same thing, otherwise we will get bored.
Correct.
So in terms of money, this one it grossed over $1.4 billion worldwide. So this is just slightly more than Iron Man 3.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I prefer Iron Man 3 to this if I had to choose between the two of them. Just gonna put that out there.
Really?
I think I do. I think there's some. I think Iron Man 3 is very underrated, mind.
Mm.
But Avengers Ultron, I I would choose to put on Iron Man 3 over Avengers Ultron, kind of on an average day. I don't know what that is. I don't know why. It's just
Yeah.
the way that I feel. Hmm.
That's fair enough.
So we move on to the final film in this phase, which is Ant-Man. So Stuart, Ant-Man thoughts and feelings. Did you see this in the cinema? Oh, oh, that's a sigh and a half.
Yes. Yeah, I watched this in the cinema. Um, didn't like it.
Didn't like it.
No,
You don't like Ant-Man,
I didn't.
the
No.
film?
Yeah,
No.
no.
Okay, why?
Well, the weird thing was is that like I remember seeing like the. Don't think I ever saw a trailer for it. I might have seen like the cinema poster for it. I remember looking at it thinking like, oh, they're gonna pitch this like a serious film, but it's actually gonna be funny because you can shrink to the size of an ant. I remember thinking like, okay, we'll give this a try. Like, I don't know what it was. I think again, when you go into like watch a film about a brand new character, obviously you got to familiarize yourself with the origin story first and all that. I just think Scott Lang, because Scott Lang wasn't the first Ant-Man either. It was originally Hank Pym. Hank Pym was the original
Yeah,
Ant-Man, isn't it?
yeah.
Which they managed to incorporate into the story, which is fine. Um, but no, there was just something about it just wasn't. I just wasn't interested in it. It didn't. I don't know. It just didn't grab me, this film. I remember just watching it thinking, okay, so he's a cat burglar or whatever. He steals the Ant-Man suit, and then he susses out the pin particles as a little fight with Falcon, doesn't he?
Yes.
Um, but I could categorically say this is probably the film that I've seen the least of. I think I only saw it that once in the cinema, and I don't know what it was. Like aspects of it were quite cool. The visual effects were great. Like there were quite cool scenes of him. When he shrinks down and he runs along the barrel of that guy's gun, and then like
Yes.
it's like, okay, that looks awesome.
Yes.
But and there were like little funny moments in there when like they're fighting on like the toy train tracks, and the camera does that thing where it shows it in real time, so it's not as epic. So it just shows this toy train like.
Yeah.
So I like that, and I'm sure they use a similar thing in the Night at the Museum films.
All right.
There's a sequence where Steve Coogan's he's like Roman soldier,
Yeah.
and they basically puncturing like the tire of this car. So they have like this massive gust of wind like blowing them, and then the camera just like switches back to like the car, and obviously you don't see the tire deflate. You don't hear any kind of hissing noise. So it's that kind of contrast was quite funny, like.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I do quite like that they did that in Ant-Man. But no, yeah, I can't put my finger on it. There was just something about it that I didn't enjoy. I think Paul Rudd was he's a good actor and he was the right choice for the character.
Yeah.
Um, and Evangelina Lilly as well as Wasp. Um, she was really good as well. But yeah, no, something about this film, I just kind of went,
Okay
no.
then. So I mean, I actually really like Ant-Man. Okay, and I didn't see it in the cinema. This is one I saw at home, but it just came and went. I think that I saw. This is interesting, and that I'm looking at it now. I saw Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and then Avengers at the cinema. The new ones I didn't go and see in the cinema. So
Mm,
there's an interesting step back straight away. So
yeah,
they're bringing in these new characters and new film franchises, and I'm perhaps thinking, I'll wait until it's on Sky or whatever it was, and I'll see it then. And that's what I did. And I remember really enjoying Ant-Man. I didn't think it was anything particularly revolutionary in terms of story or even effect, to be honest. I think it looked amazing, don't get me wrong. And I loved all the shrinking effects and all the growing effects. I thought they were all fab, and I enjoyed the comedy. I enjoyed the villain. I enjoyed the jeopardy. I enjoyed the cast. I think a lot of it clicked in place. It was really really good for what it was, but it wasn't anything thrilling and new and exciting. It was another hero man film, and it just came and it was another one.
yeah.
So I wonder if already at this point, are we starting to maybe sort of slow down in the excitement area of the MCU?
Mm,
Is Ant-Man the start of perhaps a bit of a, okay, we've seen a second Avengers film. It did really well. I'm glad we watched it. We haven't really touched this time around now on the fact that all the films are connected and how they're connected, because that was really what the first phase was all about, wasn't it? How are these films connected, and do they all fit together, and they're all leading towards something? Now that we know that that's already the pattern and what's going to happen again, we watch it happen again without really a bit less exciting knowing that they're all going to come together, and why, because they've already been together. Do you get me? So
yes,
now that there's a new character coming in, we're like, okay, so now somebody new, we get his own film, cool, he'll probably be in an Avengers film soon, yeah, great. Like, it's
yes,
already starting to become a bit of the norm.
yes.
So I wonder if both Guardians and Ant-Man are a turning point.
Well, weirdly, in it, there's two films introduce new characters who are, and both films, are quite heavy on the humor as well.
They are. They are.
I think,
So that's interesting.
yeah, if any characters are going to be funny, it will be them. Um, like it was, it's not like it didn't suit them or anything. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think, it's weird looking at it now because no, if you were to assume you don't know what's coming next after Ant-Man, you might kind of think, oh, I hope they're not going to go down this route now, trying to make like everything funny. But at the same time,
Yeah.
I think at the time, all I was thinking was, oh, I'm excited for the next Marvel film. I wonder who they'll do next. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
in hopes that they'll do a character that would be new. But I might be like, oh no, yeah, this character's really cool. I actually really like this one.
Yeah.
So I think you could, in that way, then you could just look at Ant-Man as like the sort of the Incredible Hulk of Phase One.
Maybe. I mean, it's an interesting one, because I suppose at this point we do kind of need fresh blood at this point.
Mm.
Having said that, they did just introduce Wanda, Vision, Wanda's brother, who
Quicksilver, yeah.
admittedly, yeah, Quicksilver. Um, did anybody else come into the Anthony Mackie is sort of growing as a character?
Oh,
Like,
Falcon, yeah.
yeah, we've just had a few more Avengers, and then at the end of Avengers, Age of Ultron, it, it it's kind of unclear what's going to happen next. Then we end this phase with a brand new film. brand
Mm.
new character, and it's a bit like, well, this is another new character we've got to learn now. Obviously, they're building on what's been successful already, and I get it, and it is funny, like you said. And but we do at this point. Otherwise, we can't have Phase 3 with just like Iron Man 4, Thor 3, Captain America 3. We can't have that and then another Avengers film. It does need to expand to be able to continue. So it makes sense it would do that. And Guardians of the Galaxy does that very successfully. Probably Ant-Man not so much.
Mm.
But having said that, I quite enjoy it. Again, it's another one of those ones. If it was on like a Sunday afternoon, like Sunday evening, and it was there, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll stick a bit of Ant-Man on. That's cool. I don't go racing to go and put it on. I can't wait to watch Ant-Man again. It's not. I don't feel like that, but I do feel quite happy when I kind of stumble across it.
Mm. Yeah,
Hmm.
I think these films will have to give another chance. I wonder how I would enjoy them now, if at all, in retrospect. Like,
Well, I think it's changed. I mean, there's a few interesting kind of facts about this one. One interesting fact is that Paul Rudd gets actually a writing credit on this film.
does he?
He does. Now, Paul Rudd is quite a comedy. He's a comedian, isn't he? Quite a comedian. And I think he probably does improvise his one-liners, his responses, his retorts. I think he kind of probably does a bit of that. There's probably a lot
Yes.
of that going on, and I can imagine if he's adding lines here, there, and everywhere and fleshing out his character, perhaps that's how he's got a writing credit. But I have no proof of that. That's just me spitballing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, he does. And then in terms of the money, it grossed more than $519 million. So
Wow.
this is the poorest of the money of this phase.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite interesting because last time the film that followed an Avengers film was Iron Man 3, and it took $1.2 billion. This is the film following the next Avengers film, 519 million. That's half,
Mm.
less than half.
Yeah.
It was a chance. It took a chance. They did a new film, a character, a comedy, a caper. It's very different in tone. Again, it's its own thing.
Yes.
So I applaud their bravery, and yet perhaps we are witnessing the start of a turn in a bad way.
I think so.
Hmm.
I just think when I look at the phases in general, like phase one for me, um, the least enjoyable film is Incredible Hulk. So that's 1 out of 6. For phase two, there are more films that I didn't enjoy.
Hmm.
So for me, it's Iron Man 3, Dark World, Ant-Man.
Hmm.
That's half of the phase two. So 3 out of 6 films
Hmm.
I just couldn't click with. Now
Interesting.
that could just be me,
Hmm.
but if that's like the general consensus for like a lot of fans, that's half of your phase there. Like,
It is. It is. So this is very, very interesting. Okay, and so let's wrap this conversation up then. I've got a few questions for you before we actually finish. Okay. So what do you think, and in phase two, what is your favorite film from phase two? And what is the best film from phase two?
ooh, those are very different questions.
They are, and why I asked them both.
Right. Okay. Favorite film, I would say Winter Soldier.
Okay.
Best film? Um, see, I do kind of think it is Winter Soldier.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
For me, the best film is Winter Soldier.
Mm.
But my favorite film is not Winter Soldier. I think it might be Thor, which I know is very controversial, but out of just pure enjoyment, it might be Thor, or it might be Iron Man 3, which is strange.
Yes.
The rest of them, I think there's better films in there, but I think that they are might be my favorite.
Well,
Okay, so have you got in this whole phase a standout character or character moment?
ooh, well, in the phase itself.
In the whole phase,
Right.
or like scene or something. What stands out to you?
Let's have a little think. Um, right. Yeah. No, I know this one straight away. Elevator scene in The Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah, it's a good scene. Good scene. I think that mine would be, and this is kind of quite a kind of kind of corny scene in a way, but it's actually I think in Guardians of the Galaxy when they join hands whilst holding the Infinity Stone to defeat the villain whose name has gone from my mind.
Ronan.
Yeah, I like that. I like he did that little dance off, and then
Yes.
but then he actually grabs the stone and he's gonna die. But they all like no no no, and they all step up to the plate, grab his hand, and in turn, and then Rocket grabs it, and then they like it all just goes like it's all the wind's whirring around them, and suddenly the wind stops, and if they take control of the power, and then he's like, "We're the Guardians of the Galaxy," and I was like, "Fucking yeah, they are." And I thought that stood out for me. I was like, "Yes, they are my Guardians."
Yes. It's a very good scene. Very
Okay,
powerful.
so in conclusion, then, Stu, what is your verdict on Phase Two?
Right. I think Phase Two, I think, was very good. I think it held up against Phase One very well. Phase One, you've been introduced to this cinematic universe. So, while you're watching Phase One, you're going, "Oh, I can't wait to see what they do next." Overall, I was not disappointed in Phase Two. I think the films that I didn't like, they weren't terrible. I was just kind of like, oh, I just don't think they're great. But the films that were good were awesome.
Mm-hmm. Nice,
So
nice.
they were both ends of the scale there. But no, I think as a phase goes, even though there are more films in there that I dislike, I think as a phase, as it goes, pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with you actually. For me, this phase I really enjoy. But I think as we move forward through this discussion on the phases, we're going to come to a point where we're going to say this phase wasn't very good, was it? I think that might happen, or perhaps not. Perhaps I don't know whether we will. But this phase for me is one I enjoy.
Hmm.
Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best phase. I just enjoy this sort of era. It's kind of a sequel. If you think of the phases as one particular film, this is the sequel to the first phase. The
Yes.
first phase is all those introductions. The second phase is a bit more dealing with the characters you know already and them trying to develop the characters. And so I quite enjoy this phase. Um, but I do think Ant-Man is the wrong tone to end it on. I think it should have ended with Avengers Age of Ultron.
Yes.
And I think Ant-Man could have come a little bit earlier on in the phase. I think that might have given it a bit more of a better structure. But yeah, I enjoy the phase. I don't think it's the best phase, but because it has those films that I really like, it's probably it's probably up to one of my favorite phases.
Hmm. Yeah, it is
Mm,
a good phase.
yeah. And obviously, next time we're going on to phase three,
Hmm.
which right now I have absolutely no clue what is in phase three. I'm not even going to look. I'm just going to embrace that when we get to it and just and see what happens. Because
Yes.
the phases I do get a bit blurry when it comes to what is in each phase. I'll be honest.
Hmm.
I don't know why. Just do. Okay, so then, Stuart, do you have a movie quote for all of us, please?
I do, but it's a rather lengthy one.
Oh, well, one quite enjoys a rather lengthy one.
Here we go.
I'm talking about movie quotes, people. Get your minds out of the gutter.
Yes.
Please, quote us your lengthy quote.
Okay, here we go. Do you wish me a good morning, or mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not? Or that you feel good this morning, or that it is a morning to be good on?
Stumped.
Really?
I am stumped.
Wow. I'm surprised.
I'm telling you, it's something to do with the delivery. This is not a criticism of the delivery. It's because the delivery of the quotes are so different in tone and stuff to the actual quotes.
Yes.
That's what throws me. Which is what you're trying to do, let's be honest. You're trying to throw me, aren't you?
Well, yeah, that's the intention.
Yes. Well, fair play. You have thrown me. One does not know that. It was fairly lengthy, though. Fair play.
Yes.
Okay, well then. So, listeners, what do you think of our opinions on Phase 2 of the MCU? Do you agree? Do you disagree? We would actually quite like to know. You can follow us on all of the socials: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. The links are all in the show notes. I think it's pretty much all at Fandom Pod, but click on the links below just in case. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. Please hit subscribe and make sure you never miss an episode. And if you could leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, that would be amazing because it means that other listeners can find us. Please, Stuart, say your goodbyes.
Goodbyes.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We will catch you on the next episode of What's Your Fandom?